So good morning. I know 8:30, tough time for a lot of people, especially after a big game like last night. But hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions. If I don't get to your question, or if you're not satisfied with what I say during the presentation, there'll be questions at the end. Feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll be available after the presentation to talk with anyone as well. But this is, hopefully, the fact that I only have roughly an hour, it's hard to answer a lot of these questions in an hour. So this is a pretty big topic. So hopefully I'm going to give everybody at least some information to think about, something to take back with them, something that will start the conversation, because that's where everything has to begin, is with the conversation of how do we start to move this forward. And a little bit about myself. I'm, again, Kenneth Hable. I work for Tri-Imaging Solutions in Nashville, outside of Nashville. But I'm originally from Wisconsin, born and raised here. Did some of my education here, also did education around the country. But I've been in the industry about 15 years on the engineering service side of it, but I've been actually related to imaging since I was 20 years old. So I don't care to tell you how many years that's been, but it's more than double the 15. Okay. So I started out as a tech. I was an administrator. I was an assistant director of a medical imaging department. As you can see, I'm an MD, which doesn't mean anything other than I have a lot of student loan debt. And, but the thing that I find most fascinating is that I've interacted with this field from almost every single perspective. I've been a patient. I've been the person taking care of the patient. I've been the person directing the people that are taking care of the patients and performing the exams. I was taught to be the guy that yelled at those people as well. I'm now service side, so I'm getting yelled at on either end of the spectrum. And it's, it's just kind of how it works. But the biggest thing that we need to do is we need to have a conversation about how we move people into this industry. And we have a very valuable resource readily available to us. So the biggest question is, why are we not taking advantage of it, and why are we not creating a more seamless transition to get into it? So people that are in attendance today, I don't know, hopefully this applies to everybody here. OEM service, I doubt it, but I want to put it on there because otherwise they look at you funny. In-house BMET people, obviously, third party and ISO, clinical services. Another thing that we're going to have a real quick conversation about is all the different names. We have this, I feel like we almost have a communication problem, and part of that is because we call ourselves a lot of different things, and we try to be different from everybody by what we call ourselves. And I don't really know if that's all that important anymore. So again, this is all purely my perspective. For the next hour, hopefully we'll cover these topics. We're going to have a little discussion on the current landscape. What are we currently dealing with? What I just said, the difference in names, the difference in responsibilities, in-house versus third party versus ISO versus OEM, all those good things. We're going to, evaluate how we currently can get into image engineering. We're going to look at how we can try to push for more cross-training and increase employee value. And then lastly, we're going to look at career flexibility. To me, these are really core parts of all of this, because without one of these things, you either don't have the desire, you don't have the drive, you don't have the education necessary, or you don't have the path to get into doing what we, doing the imaging engineering side of it. So, from what I hear, everybody wants to become an imaging engineer. And we were just touching on this before the beginning of this, actually. I'm hearing this from people like right out of graduate school. So I have people that will come to me, via LinkedIn or whatever, and they're 20 years old and they want to be an imaging engineer. And I don't have a problem with a 20-year-old being an imaging engineer. But my question is, why do you want to be an engineer? One of the reasons why is because it's kind of like You know, if you're gonna work on cars, you wanna work on cars, you know, that's great. But that's just one reason. Usually if you work on a Ferrari versus a Ford, you get paid more. You know, that's another reason. Some people see it as more of a prestige issue that they get to say they're an imaging engineer. And then there's always this thing that we keep saying there's this huge lack of. And so there's like this natural tendency of people to want to go step into where there's a void because it creates more opportunity for them. It creates growth. Those are all good reasons as long as they're within the right spectrum. So the current landscape, and I couldn't even come up, I came up with more, but the word bubble got really weird looking, and I don't like it, so I took the words out of it. But if you look at this, there's, you know, a lot of different things in here that we either call ourselves, label ourselves, or use to identify ourselves. I also had to like kind of play with it a little bit because the thing that I used online takes the word that's used most often and puts it right square in the middle. And it kept putting tech there because we use tech after almost anything, and it means a bunch of different things. It can mean technician, it can mean technologist, it can mean technically oriented, it can mean that you just wanted to make your name sound better, so you added tech to the end of it. You know, so again, what we call ourselves, how we call ourselves, how we, what kind of letters we use after our names, things like that originally started as differentiation. Now what we have is we have all these little bubbles all over the place. And we don't have a clear path of how we take those bubbles and unite them into a seamless way of getting from point A to point B. Thanks to pay scale, this is what a model of how somebody can go from biomedical engineering to any of those fields over on the side, most of which are somewhat imaging related. So you can see that this is kind of like some kind of weird, you know, Venn scatter diagram or something. It's like you see all these different paths and rivers and interconnections and how you go from point A to point B. Again, this is not clear and it's not structured. So without structure, we lack direction. We lack a relative ease in getting people involved because it's always seems so convoluted when we have to talk to them about how they go from point A to point B. Okay, so right now, what I call a common path. We kind of have three ways of getting into imaging engineering. Somehow you're qualified to get hired by an OEM. So here in Wisconsin, the easiest thing is always GE as an example. Okay, so you went to biomedical school, or you went to electrical engineering school, or you went to a 2-year electronics program, or you know, a host of other things. And GE is, you know, traditionally looking to hire 1,500 people, and you're one of the lucky ones that got there. So now the door's been like just totally kicked open for you. You walk in through the OEM door, they train you, they invest in you, they do all these wonderful things for you. They let you work to death for a couple of years, and then they start kind of slowly pushing you away because at a certain point they're going to cut you loose because there's another 20-year-old that they can grab and pull through the door and start the process all over again. And I don't say that negatively. I'm not putting GE down for that. That's how big companies traditionally work with their general labor force. And I'll be real honest with you, I know a lot of people that work for GE. I know a lot of people that work for Siemens. I know people that went to work for these companies thinking that this was their end game. They were going to work for GE until they either died or until they got to the point where they hated their job so much they were going to hang it up. But then they were going to walk away and they were going to say, I worked my entire life as a GE engineer and I love what I did. And it didn't work out. So there are a few success stories out there. I actually have a very good friend that's going through his 40th year with Siemens. He's the only person that I know that I can say that about. You know, you hear stories. There's always the, you know, the mythical wildebeest out there or Bigfoot running around, but you know, he's the only one that I know that's really made it pretty much past like the 20-year mark, working for an OEM. Military training. Almost everybody that I know in this field came from the military. That was like the de facto standard. Because when you came out of the military, you know, you were a sonar guy or a radar guy or a radio guy or a weapons guy or a guided something guy or woman, whatever. And all of a sudden, you know, hey, if you can learn that and you can do that and you can, you know, actually perform at a very high level doing this kind of technical work, we can teach you to be an X-ray guy or a CT guy or an MR guy or woman. You know, it's not rocket science, literally. It's problem solving. And if you're given the opportunity to learn what you need to learn, there's a lot of potential for people to be able to be very good at this field. But again, the military is almost like a dry path. Why? Just because it's so. And again, nobody said that that's the right thing for us to do, but it was the pool of people that we could open our arms to bring into the industry, because there was no other thing that was feeding that pool. You know, what do you do when you've been a radar guy or woman for 20 years in the military? You get out of the military. What are you going to do? You can't go be a radar guy for somebody else. They don't let you do that. So you got to do something that at least is somewhat logical. And ironically, a lot of the problem solving, a lot of the electronics, a lot of the you know, parallels between the industries exist. So it's a very natural fit. And then dumb luck. I'm an example of dumb luck. I got in this industry because I applied for a job. And it's the best thing that ever happened. You know, so again, there are unicorns out there. It happens. Maybe, you know, maybe there's people that regret giving me that opportunity. I don't know. But I love this job. I love what I do, and I'm very passionate about what I do. But all of my training that I had in this industry did not set me up for, you know, being a CT expert or an MR expert. It didn't. I know everything about why we use them, how they work from a imaging side. I knew why we prescribed it. I knew what we were trying to, you know, I could look at a situation and say, oh, is this a better situation for a CT or an MR? What am I trying to get as an answer? That's how we decide which one's better until we do one and then we can get what we wanted out of that, sort of into the other one. But I didn't have the electronics background. I'm completely self-taught. I just had a desire to learn. I must have been dropped on my head or something, because as a kid, I used to tear stuff apart, put it back together. I mean, I was an engineer from day one. But somewhere along the line, either somebody told me I wanted to be a doctor, or I got dropped on my head and woke up and said I wanted to be a doctor. And from that point on, my whole life was geared towards being a doctor. And I love that aspect of it too. You know, I mean, it's funny how that works. But the similarities are very complementary to one another. I look at illness the same way as I look at a sick CT scanner. Okay, CT's not working. No, it's sick. What's wrong with it? You know, you have a kid that's, you know, running temperature, got all red, snotty nose and red ears and stuff like that. You treat it the same way as you treat a CT scanner that, you know, will only start to spin and then stop. It makes a clunky noise. You know, you're looking at the symptoms and you're trying to figure out what problems are. So we have all of these natural ways of kind of getting into this industry. We have what I call the wandering path, which, you know, northern Wisconsin road, we've all been on probably. Windy, twisty, turny. These are the people that have to work for it. So they were basically picked up by independent service organizations or third-party service groups, or were able to, you know, be fortunate enough that the administration in their hospital or their group said, hey, we're going to start taking internal employees. We're going to start investing in them. And we're going to get them trained to start doing this. And those people typically fall within the terminology, forgive me please, but it gets really long typing all those names. BMET, you know, clinical engineering, clinical services. Again, there's a bunch of different titles, but usually they're the people that get tagged. And the reason is because it's the closest thing we have. You're fixing everything from warming blankets to beds to, you know, anesthesia machines. And in some cases, even ultrasound machines. You know, it's like ultrasound's kind of the redheaded stepchild, and I don't mean to pick on redheads or anything, it's just a natural thing, but they're like the non-imaging field, you know. It's like nobody in imaging wants to deal with ultrasound because it's just sound. I mean, come on, you know, we all deserve more work than that. So, but these people are already dealing with some of the most complex machinery we use every day in surgery, in hospitals, and, you know, in every type of medical interaction that we have with patients. We have certifications out there now that are already driven towards trying to get people into this line of repair. We have the CREVs and others, as you can see. And then lastly, there's the secondary training. And again, this kind of comes down to more or less, are you lucky enough to get it? If you're in one of these more progressive areas or hospital groups where they're going to give you the opportunity. I literally had somebody contact me the other day and they said, my manager told me to get training. And I said, well, that's awesome. Did he specify, you know, what kind of training? No, he told me to get training. We have a training budget, and if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. And we don't want to do that. So they really don't care where I go or what I get trained in. And I was like, oh, geez, I can help you. You know, I can train you in all kinds of useless stuff, you know. But you know, again, those are unicorns to me. Those are not the norms for us to have somebody just call and say, wow, what do I need to do to take, you know, one of your CT classes? Well, you got to take introductory to CT, and then you got to take CT specialty class, and, you know, and they're like, hey, sign me up. Okay, I can do that. So again, wandering path mainly because you're just navigating yourself around through it. There's no direction. There's nobody helping you besides maybe somebody saying, I got a blank check, go spend it, you know, or something like that. And then lastly, we have broken path. And this is the one that I think we always hear about. How do I get from point A to point B? There's this huge chasm in between. I don't know how to get across it. And, you know, my favorite one, well, you're a BMET, fix it. You know, we've all been in positions that we haven't been comfortable with, but I've heard some horror stories of, you know, hey, we're 20 people behind in CT and we call somebody up from downstairs. That sounds like they call the janitorial staff. And that's really not what we should be looking at. We should be calling people that we feel we can make a serious investment in and opportunity in trying to figure out what's wrong with the machine. So, like I said, I know several people that told me both, you know, scary and laughable stories about this, but the reality of it is that no one should be just thrown into this. You know, lack of structured educational process. How good is a process if all of a sudden you just get grabbed out of your chair and told, hey, you know, leave that infusion pump alone. We're going to go look at this MRI. You know, first of all, everybody's going to go, yeah, awesome. But then they're going to get up there and they're going to go, yeah. They'll spend an hour looking like they think they know what they're talking about, and then they'll say, hey, you should call GE. Yeah. And it's not their fault because they're being put into a position that they're not ready to be in. We have a lack of this transitional opportunity. How do we take people that have the skill set but don't have the experience and the knowledge and get them to where they need to be? So this is not a new problem. There's been a lot of focus on this lately. The problem is getting worse, I would say, as most things do. Things have to get to a certain point of badness before we finally like grab hold of the situation and say we're going to try to fix it. Like I said, I've been in the engineering side of this business for about 15 years, and I've been talking about this or hearing stories about this since I started. You know, when I started, I was told, wow, getting into this at a great time because everybody's old. Well, guess what? Now I'm old. We're still talking about it. That's a problem. You know, that's one of the reasons why I'm involved in this, is because literally I've been in this field for 15 years and I really haven't seen it gain any traction. So we need to do something about it. And I started getting much more involved. And being involved is really a powerful thing. Working with technical schools, working with other professionals that are related in a host of different ways, from education to working in the, working in multiple aspects of these fields, as well as people in management. It takes a little bit of everybody figuring out how we're going to do this, because I can come up with a plan, but it doesn't mean anybody's going to listen to me. And I don't have anywhere near the connections, the power, the authority, whatever it's going to take to start to structure everything from formal education practices, hands-on training opportunities and apprenticeships into employment opportunities. If you back up and you think about that, that's a ginormous thing that we're talking about. And it's not, and obviously it's not going to happen overnight, but it obviously also shouldn't take us 15 plus years to do. There's been a lot of talk about COVID. COVID, yes, we have COVID, okay? This is not related to COVID. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, again, lately there's been some people out there kind of pushing like, hey, COVID's driven, the field this way or that way. In reality, COVID didn't change a lot of things for us, technically. Yeah, it happened, and we're moving on. It impacted us. There's no way anybody with, in my opinion, a reasonable sense of reality can say that COVID hasn't impacted us. Okay, we can probably get into all kinds of esoteric conversations about how much and why and who and all that kind of stuff, but that's beyond the scope of this. The reality of it is that it's had an impact on us. It definitely has reduced the number of radiology exams that were performed. We got into a situation where we were doing purely necessary examinations. It's just reality. We had to deal with the circumstances. It also limited travel. So there were travel bans, there were airline shutdowns, all that negative stuff, but it also significantly derailed processes that people had started. We have customers that were working on getting people trained, and then suddenly we went 18 months with, hey, we can't let our people travel. So how are they going to get trained to travel? Good question. Mix of answers, and it's something that we'll talk about a little bit later. But yes, COVID. Okay, COVID happened, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get beyond COVID. So when we get beyond COVID, what COVID, in my opinion, really taught us was how important imaging is. CT turned out to be the most optimal diagnostic tool that we had for any type of COVID symptoms that involved everything from literally the sinuses through the thorax and chest area. Okay, so to say we were doing less exams, yes, we were, but the exams that we were doing actually had a significantly higher importance to them. Okay, because now we weren't doing a lot of people got a general cold, but we're still going to do the scan because they get pulled every year and all this other stuff that we typically do in medicine. It demonstrated the absolute importance of keeping our imaging systems working and working properly. I cannot stress that enough, because I dealt with supporting engineers that were supporting COVID hospitals. And if you had 2 CT scanners in a COVID hospital and one of those scanners went down, that is really the reality of people are dying. And I'll be honest, it's one of the first times in my entire career where I actually really felt like if I didn't do my job as absolutely well as I could, people could die. And I mean, we use that as like every system I repair with my family. How many engineers have ever said that? Pretty much all of us at some point or another, we have that in our heads. I think it's a great thing that we do that. It's a reality check for us. It holds us somewhat accountable in our own work ethic. But this actually changed the game, because people were dying. It wasn't a check anymore. It was a reality that things were happening. And it like made us look at things and say, we have these localized resources, why are we not using them? We have people in this building right now that if they were trained could do more to support us. It was one of the biggest things for one of our customers was this realization of how do we use our in-house available people more efficiently or effectively and get greater value out of their time, but also increase their worth. So what is the problem? We're aging out. It's a nice way of saying we're getting old and tired. Reality-wise, that is what it is. When I came into this field, I was told the average age of the engineers was 55. Well, that was 15 years ago. So what age does that make them now? 7. And the ironic part of it is probably 2 out of every 3 that I know are still working. The reason they're working is 1, because they love what they do, and 2, because they're getting paid ridiculous amounts of money to do something because they keep getting told that they can't be replaced. And that's just absurd. We have people. We just need to get people trained and in the right path of getting over that gap so that they benefit from it. So, the lemmings running off of the cliff. This is what I was told was going to happen. The irony in it is only 1 in 5 of those people is actually going off the cliff. The rest of them are still running up the hill. The cliff is just getting further and further away from them. Other parts of what the problem actually is a lack of recognition that exists with the current opportunities of people. I'm going to start using HTM now because HTM is kind of the new phrase that we refer to collectively all those people that were in that work goal. It makes it a lot easier. I think it's a unifying word. It's something that actually our company is looking at from a training perspective, looking at trying to update our terminology, trying to be more inclusive. Because when we say BMET, we're just taking one segment out of that whole bubble of words of people that are actually qualified to get into the field. And we kind of feel like we should, this isn't meant to be like a feel-good thing. It's actually meant to be like, let's get current. The reality of it is the industry is using the term. We saw it on the back of the shirts that they're wearing right now around the field, around the hotel here. So we're going to just try to make the most of it, and we're going to start referencing them that way, and that's going to start helping with communication. It's going to start helping streamline things because now we don't have to try to say 15 different names, or when we use a name, we're not implying that they're the only ones that count or that could be in the program or that qualify to go through this training or whatever. We're getting down to a point where I look at people's resumes. I don't look at what your title is. I look at what have you done? What is your training? And what is your experience? Because I'll be honest with you, you could be the most highly qualified biomedical technology person out there, and I won't let you touch my system if I don't think that you're qualified. But you could be a really good car mechanic that really thinks outside the box, and you could make an amazing imaging engineer. There isn't this one model fits all kind of thing. We all have to start taking the opportunities that present themselves and then melding that with how we train people to come up with the right mix for what becomes an imaging engineer in the end. It's kind of through the artist's eyes, if you want to be all philosophical about it. But the reality of it is, I know what I do well and why I do it. I know how the people that I work with, how their minds work, how they assimilate to the situation and problem solve. That in itself is far more important than what you call yourself or what kind of training you initially went through. Because we can teach you whatever we need you to know as long as you're game for learning. our goal is to provide this bridge. The whole concept of this conversation is how do we bridge that gap? We bridge that gap through several things. The biggest one is continuity. We have to have a conversation about the same topic and be on the same page. So again, things like what we call ourselves, how we go about interacting with one another, and how we start evaluating what people's capabilities really are versus what their education or their title says that they can do. To say that I'm a medical doctor, but that I repair CTs always gets people kind of like, huh? You know, I don't like being a doctor. I'll be honest, dealing with patients sucks. And I was older when I became a doctor. When I graduated medical school, I was 40 years old, okay? I was old enough to realize that I was not gonna be one of those, I was not gonna walk in and be, you know, hey, how you doing today? I was gonna be one of those guys that just wanted to take a pencil and stick it through my head every time somebody complained about their high blood pressure that didn't take their medication. You know, because I was like that at my clinicals. I spent 16 weeks listening to people tell me, you know, I don't like feeling the way I feel, but I hate taking pills. Well, guess what? You either take the pills and feel better or shut up. That doesn't go over well. People don't receive that well from their doctors, you know? I was going to be one of those guys that everybody complained about after they left. You know, my Yelp rating would have been like, you know? So I was fortunate in the sense that at that point in my life, I realized it. And I thought, you know what, I'm not signing up for another 25, 30 years. And I broke the cardinal rule, which is, you know, I left the flock. And it's not cool. People like it. You know, it's a cult. It's like, geez, you know, you're a Scientologist, and now you're going on TV and talking about it. That's what I feel like sometimes. But the reality of it is I have a very good perspective of things. But the other part of it is I'm doing something that I love. But how did I go from being a doctor to fixing CT scanners? That's the thing that people like go, it just blows their head. And the reality of it is I was a unicorn. I got that perfect dumb luck opportunity. And then I took the absolute most of it. I invested myself 100%, and I did everything that I could do, even on my own, which is another kind of foreign concept for a lot of young people, to get to where I am. And that's what we need to start instilling in people. We need to be able to create a path that's walkable instead of having a huge hole in it. And then we need to give them the opportunity to say, you either get to walk the path and make it to the other side or you don't. And if they do, we have to continue moving them forward. All right, so bridging the gap. What I just spoke about, literally, it is putting the puzzle piece in between. We have an entire workforce that's capable of doing what we need them to do, and we have a gigantic need on the other side. And we have a few companies out there that have some kind of mechanism of putting that last puzzle piece in. We're trying to work harder with educational services, tech schools especially. They have the BMET programs. Let's evolve the BMET programs. Let's evolve them from just a BMET program to an imaging program. Or let's make an imaging component. Become a BMET and then continue your education by going through the imaging component side. We're creating more on-the-job training. We have large health organizations that are investing in their staff and saying, we have the people, we have the technology, we have the, you know, the combination of being able to take these people from on this side of the building and move over to this side of the building. Okay, well, that's great, let's do it. And then they're coming to us to do training. And then, again, the biggest thing that we need to do is we need to give everybody the free choice to walk across that bridge. If it's what somebody wants to do, they need to be able to find the path and get on the path how they're going to get there. So I hate this. I simply hate this. What's in it for me? I don't say that in a negative sense. I say it because, again, you have to have something in it. You have to be invested in what you do, or you're not going to do it well. And I'm sure to some degree everybody feels that in this room. Whether it's your work, whether it's your hobby, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your family, doesn't matter. You know, if you want to have a good environment, you have to invest into it. So what's in it for me? Personal and professional achievement. We all want some kind of recognition. We all want some kind of opportunity. Increased flexibility in career options. It's a huge one. You know, some people want to stay in one place, but they want to be able to progress their career. Ideally, they would like to stay with one employer and they want to be able to progress their career. Other people could care less. They want to progress their career, and if that means picking up from Wisconsin and moving to Tennessee or going to Texas or going to Boston, it doesn't matter. They're willing to do what they need to do because that's the right opportunity for them. Increased pay and benefits. Too much, in my opinion, too easy of a thing to focus on, okay? But it's like everything else in life. You know, I'm gonna be real. You put a big cake in front of me, I'm gonna use as much of that cake as I do. You know, I'm not proud of it, but that's reality. And I admit that about myself. Pay is a big draw. And I don't blame people for going for pay. You know, there's the people out there, you see their resumes, they haven't worked longer than 24 months at any one place. Because what they do is they work 18 months, which gives them enough street credit to be able to get more from somebody else. Okay, again, that's fine. You know, that's part of life. But the other thing is that increased pay is also a real determining factor in people wanting to stay with certain employers. They feel like they get great benefits and great pay from their employer. And if they can take the next step up the run, it only gets better for them. That's what we all want. We all want better. And then greater job satisfaction. Again, we're all looking for something. We're all investing in something. And we want to feel good about what we do. At the end of the day, when you go home, I'm going to speak for myself. At the end of the day, when I go home, I like the days that I go home and feel like I actually did something kind of worthwhile, like I fixed a problem. And I love it. I mean, to go home and say, man, you know, I fixed something that was down for 3 days. You know, 4 people looked at it and I spent 3 hours on the phone with them and I got it fixed. That's a huge ego booster for me. You know, that's the guy, the appendix ruptured just as I grabbed it and was taking it out of the body, and none of the schmucks went inside, and I didn't have to breathe the guy at all, and there's no chance he's gonna get sick, but it was awesome, you know? That it's the same thing. I hit a home run. You know, it was a soccer curveball, and I stepped into that thing and I cracked it, and literally I could tell from the minute my bat hit that that thing was out. It's the same feeling for me. You know, I was a middle linebacker, hitting the quarterback, best thing in the world, especially when he was looking at me. You know, that's what it was all about, you know? And the better part of that was my older brother was the quarterback. So, you know, I was raised to like drill him into the ground. And it worked. It made me love it, and it made me want to sacrifice myself sometimes in order to try to achieve it. And those are all great things. So these are the reasons that we need to enlighten people about and make them aware of it. It's not a pipe dream. It's also not like some weird internet thing. You know, we're not asking for send us $250 and we'll tell you how to unlock the secrets of this slide. You know, this is a reality thing. We have to get people that want this, but we also got to get people that don't only see these 4 bullets. I get asked all the time about certification. Is certification important? Certification is always important, okay? I don't care if it's a certification that says you can tie your shoes. It's important because guess what? If somebody ever asks you, you can actually say, look, I am certified that I can tie my shoes. It answers a very basic question of your knowledge level of something. I know a lot of people that underestimate it, and that's because they only look at it from their own perspective. I know what I can do. Do I really need a piece of paper that says that? Well, what about the thousands of people that you may be in front of that don't know it? They have no idea whether you can tie your shoes. You have slip-ons. You're cheating. It's easy to disguise how much people know. Certification simplifies it. It doesn't mean that, you know, you could write a book about it. It just means that you have some additional training, you have some level of experience, you have talked about it at least, as opposed to watch some YouTube video. All of these companies up here, which this is just like a fraction of the companies, these are companies that I deal with regularly, the companies that I know all put significant weight on certification. The reason for it is because I have to provide a certificate every time I train one of these people. And I have to keep that on record, not only for the person, but for the employer. So the person's entitled to a copy of it because they're the ones that got trained, but the employer paid for it. So the employer's entitled to a copy of it as well. Again, if they didn't care about things like that, we wouldn't have that option of doing that, or nor would we have a requirement to perform. So again, just a little smattering of it, but regardless of what the certification is for, it's valuable to have, and it's valuable in your ability to then market yourself. You have a folder of these, and when you go to a job interview, you take that folder along with you and you say, look at all the things that I have done. And I don't care if it was a free lunch to listen to a guy talk about, you know, contrast media. It's related to what you're going to do. You spent time involved in something that was career and profession oriented. Plus you got lunch out of it. You know, it's what we do. But again, that's the very minor side. The very major side is you go to a 10-week or a 10-day training course and you come out with a certificate saying that you should be at least capable of level 1 support on a particular type of machine. You know, we have an obligation to make sure that the person that we're giving that to actually meets that qualification. But from that point forward, you've established yourself. You have a foothold now. You have a foot on the ground saying, I can do this, and with more experience, I can do more. And you're leaning into the field now, as opposed to being pushed away from it. Current job markets. The current job market fluctuates a lot. Depends on when you look at it. I know this is, I'm sorry, this is hard to read, but I put in a couple of common search terms and I just grabbed little snippets from it. Biomedical equipment technician. There were, when I did the search a couple of weeks ago, there were 809 open positions based on that title alone. Okay. Now we all know that that's probably a fraction of what's really out there. Biomedical technician, when I put that same search in, I got 1,001 open positions. So first of all, what we call ourselves has an impact. This is one of the hardest things about trying to find a medical imaging engineering job, is there's really nothing, there's no job called that. Some people call it an FSE, some call it a CSE, a customer service engineer, which sounds like you should be working for Zappos shoes or something. You know, you're not out there fixing CT scanners if you're a customer service engineer, but ironically, that's what Siemens guys are called. You know, FSE or field service engineer is the common term that we use in the industry, but field service applies to everything from fixing somebody's lawnmower at their house to fixing medical equipment. So there's this huge spectrum of things. As an example, medical imaging field service, 1,734 open jobs. So if you've noticed is, as I get more specific with the terminology, the job field keeps getting larger. It's true. We need more imaging engineers, but I don't think it's necessarily a one-for-one either, because although I was specific up here, there is no search engine that I have found that can truly relate to what I'm asking for. And so Thermo Fisher might show up in here because they do, you know, validation equipment, and they do calibration equipment, and they do stuff that actually may impact my job, but isn't directly related to the medical imaging part as far as fixing the machine. nationwide survey. This touches on that whole, what's in it for me dollar thing. I took this directly from 24/7 salary survey. If you get these, if you're part of 24/7, if you get their magazine or you get their online articles, and every year they do this, I truly cannot tell you how important it is for people like me trying to do presentations to have real data, because it's incredibly hard to find. So please take advantage and do these things when you get the opportunity. They represent, so this was kind of a blending. In 2019, there was almost a across the board increase of a minimum of $2,500 per breakdown of job type that we see here. 2020, because of COVID, things changed. Most of the field were actually flat. Guess what? Directors got an increase. Directors and management, or excuse me, executives had the largest increase, along with BMET 3s. Almost everybody else stayed flat or lost money, according to the survey. Now, these are tough because if 20 people were applying, 10 of them said they lost money, well, then it's a flat line. It's all perspective based. So again, I encourage people to reply to these, but more importantly, we do see a correlation, and it's a consistent correlation, that as you progress through biomedical engineering and you move into imaging, the pay steadily goes up, which is, again, something we should all be looking for. Nobody wants to, get paid less, right? I mean, I don't know anybody that's ever wanted to get paid less. We have industry challenges. The biggest industry challenge that we have is everybody says they need to do more with less. That's kind of like buy more and save. It doesn't work. We can do more with less, but at what cost? Not doing as good a job, typically. We have 10 people last year, and this year we got 8 people, but we're doing much more work. Those 8 people are being worked to death, and then on top of it, they're not actually being able to do as thorough a job. In medical imaging engineering, the most thorough thing that we can do is a PM. It sounds simple. How hard can a PM be? You got a checklist, and you literally just follow the checklist. And you say, I'm going to speak for Siemens once because I know them verbatim. They have 3 columns on them. They have a yes column, they have a no column, and they have an NA column. Did I do it? Yes or no? Did it not apply? How hard can that be? Seriously. But it's the most important thing that I can do, because it forces me to interact with every aspect of that piece of equipment. Everything from vacuuming it, cleaning the filters, to greasing it, to checking its voltages, to making sure that it passes its calibrations. I mean, I keep telling people every day, this isn't rocket science. It's really a very easy thing if you stay structured. But what happens when we ask people to do more with less is we start cutting from areas that seem less important. Well, the machine was working great last 2 months. We do PMs every couple of months, so it must be fine. So I'm just going to check everything off. Wrong. The other thing is increased customer satisfaction. So every hospital that wants to be better than it is focuses very heavily on customer satisfaction. It is the thing that makes people want to go back to the same hospital, or in my case, the same doctor. Well, I would have failed. People would have said, I'm not going back to him. He's a creep, he's an idiot, whatever. It's really hard to directly tie these two together, yet every hospital tries to do it. It happens at the technologist level, it happens at the management level, it happens at the tech, the service tech level. There's no level at which this doesn't impact the day-to-day workings of every hospital. And the biggest thing is management needs to come to the realization that whenever you cut a corner, there's a price to be paid down the road for that. whether that's in personnel or in performance, but it's going to be in one or the other, and it's sometimes in both. So we have a management challenge. Provide training opportunities for existing in-house staff. It's probably the most direct statement that I've written in this whole thing. If I could only get that beat into a quarter of the management's head, we wouldn't be having this conversation next year. Develop in-house mentor or shadowing programs. It's one of the biggest things that I can suggest to internal development coordinators of how to try to get people to transition. Most people don't know what imaging engineering really is. It's this, ooh, I want to do that, and it sounds really cool, and they get paid more, so it's kind of great. But they don't understand what it actually is, what you're going to do while you're doing it. It also doesn't, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of people, especially again, people that are young and coming into this, that when I say, if you're a remote engineer, you work from home, and they're like, oh, great. So if there's not a job, I just hang out at home. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. You wait until the phone rings. Well, yeah, but when the phone rings, then I go and I do what I need to do. Exactly. You go and you do what you need to do. But guess what? You don't leave until you're done. I don't care if you're there for 3 days. If you haven't fixed it, you don't leave. That's the part that people don't transition to, is the demand side of the field. And depending on at what level you're in that demand, makes it, again, something that I think mentoring really starts to let people get a taste for what it's going to be like. My niece wanted to be a veterinarian all her life. My sister was incredibly smart and made her get a job working for a veterinarian when she was in high school. 2 years later, she said, guess what? I'm going to go to school for, I'm going to become a DNA specialist and become a genetic specialist, because the last thing I want to do is be a veterinarian. And I think that speaks volumes for what on-the-job, exposure does for people. When you have to be there day in, day out, it really makes you start to realize, hey, this isn't all like, woo, bells and whistles. There's actually some really sucky times. And that's reality. Encourage cross-training for existing staff. Again, we have the people, let's get them the knowledge and the ability to start doing other things outside of their current spectrum. Review current processes and procedures. We actually have a lot of industry hindering going on. We have people that will literally say that the structure doesn't allow for this type of thing. And if that's the case, I understand that, but that's probably a very outdated position to be in. We need to encourage hospitals, service groups, whatever they may be, to allow for more cross training of people and more introductory procedures for getting people to be able to transition from one part of the industry to another. Empowering the staff, that's probably the biggest thing, is unless a person wants to do it, they're not going to be very successful at it. So I've dealt with some companies that management has identified the person that's going to make this transition, instead of letting people make, what would you like to do? I'm not saying that for a manager to say he feels or she feels that a particular individual has, the right stuff to move over and start doing something different. But I think if we open that up and we give more people the opportunity to demonstrate that they have that, we will actually wind up with much better qualified candidates. And again, you do what you like. And the more you like something, usually the better you do at it. So it kind of goes hand in hand. I can force somebody down the river, or I can let somebody that loves whitewater kayak just go. And, I saw this in medicine every day. I worked when I was a tech. There was a radiologist who was a great, great guy when he wasn't at the hospital. He was 5th generation first boy doctor. Doesn't matter what your dreams are, you're the firstborn male, you're a doctor, like it or not. So he went into radiology because he thought, I get to sit in a dark room all day and read x-rays, you know, not too bad, you know, until the liability starts kicking in. And then he had to start learning, you know, reading mammograms, just put this guy in the guy. And he was like, literally, it's like somebody took a close-up picture of the forest and then asked me to identify the tree that they were looking for. That he literally said that every day was a lawsuit hanging over his head like a guillotine, waiting to fall. That's how he felt. So from the minute that he would like pull into the doctor's parking lot to the time that he got about a block away from the hospital, God was just a gigantic gift. But any other time, he was a fantastic guy. But he was doing a job that he simply hated. And he did it every day until the day that he could retire. Nobody should have to be like that. You know, who wants to live their life like that? So giving people opportunity to do what they like, empowering them to do something that they're interested in versus something that they either feel like they have to do or something that they may feel like they're being directed to do are very different things. And then there's the personal challenge. The personal challenge is no one can really do this for anyone. What we need to do is we need to build that path. We need to have that bridge that unites the two sides. And we have to inform people about how they get on the path. Once they have that information, it truly is up to them. It is up to every individual to seek out how they're going to do this. And that may be on the job training. It may be the mentoring thing that I mentioned earlier. It may be, you know, that you're fortunate enough to get a blank check and told, find some training. Well, find training that interests you. Or find training in the Bahamas or something, you know. I mean, if you're going to do something you really don't want to do it somewhere fun. And then the last thing is trying to develop and get involved in the development of things like apprenticeships. Again, 15 years is a really long time to, you know, have to go with this problem. And there's very few paths out there right now. We're trying to create a bigger, wider, more defined path. We're working with as many, you know, groups and institutions as I can possibly get involved with to try to do this. And everybody's help is greatly appreciated. So hopefully you feel like we've covered these topics. Essentially a replay of the beginning. I think I've done a pretty good job of touching on all of them, but does anyone have questions at this point?
We're like 40 years of trying.
I'm sorry?
40 years of trying.
Yeah.
Well, since the medical industry came along.
Really?
Yeah, it's been tough to, unless you work for one, there wasn't.
Right.
No.
I like I said, I was, when I first started looking at the field, I was told that the OEM was the OEM. And I believe at one time it really was. And then basically there it was, you know, again, if you came out of the military, you're like a shoe-in.
A lot of military guys got OEM training.
Right.
Yeah, they set classes just like
right, as part of whatever they were doing as well, you know, and that's the other thing. Yeah, the Air Force had, I don't know if they still do, but the Air Force had an incredible BMET program with it. And it was very heavily focused on imaging because they supported all of their own imaging equipment internally. So, you know, again, the military was doing it, but again, the government gets to do what they want. Yes, ma'am.
You talked about, hey, you could have 20-year-olds who kind of transition right from getting their BMET certification into imaging. Is there a more optimal, like, would you say like 5 years at least is good, or 10 years? Is there some feeling that you have that would be good coaching for young folks coming out of?
You know what? It's a great question, but I'll be honest with it. I've hired a couple of 20-year-olds that are fantastic engineers.
Okay.
It really comes down to, again, the right things. You got to be an outside of the box thing. You can't just expect to sit down with a description and work from top to bottom. The thing that people don't understand is when an infusion pump doesn't work, we stick it in the broken pile and we grab one out of the storage closet and we roll it over and we say, here you go. And then when we get 10 of these, we start working on it. When an imaging piece of equipment goes down, we don't have that opportunity. And that, I think, is one of the hardest things for people to adapt to, is the more or less significant. And I don't mean this as a dig, but younger people generally have a harder time kind of assessing that, but they don't have the life experience. To say to a 20-year-old that they should respond like a 40-year-old, well, see them when they're 40, and I bet you they will. But right now, I think there's plenty of people out there that have their heads on right, that happen to be young and can dive in and do the job. At this point, I'm not going to, it's not a sales presentation, but we have Tri-Imaging has an apprentice program. And, we bring in a lot of young people because we are bringing in people. They graduate from biomedical school and they come right into our apprentice program. The other part of that is we work with a lot of our larger customers who either are taking their own biomedical people or they're hiring biomedical people and becoming imaging engineers. And again, I would say the majority of our apprentices are 30 or less in age. Do I want to see that change? Yeah, I do. I'd like to see more older people because I think there's definitely a thought process that changes as you age, how you evaluate things, how you look at things and things like that. But the thing about the young people is they're incredibly eager and they're hungry. If they're the right people, it's like you can feed them with the fire hose. And it's amazing. Yes.
Yeah, that's a valid, but we also have to be cautious because hiring someone just starting to field could be a compromise big for the company, especially for imaging. We have to remember the imaging field is the money maker of the hospital.
Right.
And you don't want to compromise that, but I know the whole idea of helping someone starting over, but I also think about a process that person needs to pass in order to achieve and become what we need, have a title. For example, say this person now has become an asset.
Right.
So it's not saying that someone who's been hired for being a BMET one now can jump onto an imaging grad one. Could be the case by starting looking at the small devices, just like a regular biomed. You start with infusion. Everybody has done that. So I know what's that.
Right.
When you jump into an imaging one, what are you going to start doing? Something that's not going to be compromising. Let's just say ultrasound sheets, probes, things like that. You're learning the process in order to get there. But I will say that the first thing that can motivate a young person to go into this, and I didn't see that, is I think it's money. That's what it is. I experienced. I remember when I was a BMET one, I wanted to jump into imaging because of the money. And also the eager learn things, all the physics, the mechanics. So that was quite exciting. But for a younger person, I think money is one of the reasons why we jump into imaging.
And like I said, I want people to be motivated by money. Don't get me wrong. I'm motivated by money. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. But the reality of it is it has to be tempered by the rest of it. And I agree fully. What I'm seeing is it almost is universal. And this is the nice thing that I see is it isn't so much age dependent, is that they're starting out very, very fenced in. We're taking people and we're taking them from either being right out of biomed school or maybe having 5 years of biomed experience or something like that. They're in that range of age. And we're bringing them into the imaging field. But most of them have been very structured in what they're doing. They're coming in and they're being focused on one thing: mobile X-ray CT. I'm sorry, mobile X-ray and CRs. We haven't done ultrasound, but we're looking at bringing ultrasound into it. The other one that's really big is mammography. And the really weird thing about mammography is it's hyper-regulated. So you have to have incredible attention to detail. But when you have somebody that's young and eager, they do actually, that fits them really well. And they don't need to be quite so broad thinking. They almost get to be hyper focused on how, you know, when you know how a hologic mammography system works, you can work on them all day long. It's not as diverse as an entire system platform in CT or MR or something like that. And I'm not minimizing it, but I'm saying it's easier to take people and get that to be the thing that they start on. And I agree completely that you can't just like open the floodgates to them and say, you know, run amok, because that's exactly what's going to happen. It's just going to be chaos. And what we're seeing is that both the employers and the people looking to hire want focus from new people. Because again, I think the awareness is now there that once you're in, once you're through the door, now it's a big funnel. You can start with one thing, and in a couple of years, now you're doing 2 or 3 things, and a couple more years you could be doing 5 things, or you go you just stay focused on one thing, and you just keep getting better and better and better at it. You become a level 2 support person, become a level 3 of it, you know, if they do that structure. And you're now providing the really hyper-focused, detailed troubleshooting for the people that are at the level 1 position. And that's essentially what I do, is, you know, I'm the guy that when the regular engineer can't fix it, calls me and says, I'm out of ideas, what do I do? So that's the progress that I'm striving to develop, actually. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I just a comment.
Yes.
I'm an engineer background. I had a biomed tell me once, I don't want to be an engineer because you're always working underneath the watchful eye of the customer when you're in the guy or gal. They're standing there with their arms crossed, going, tapping their foot with the system. And versus a biomed, you usually take their stuff back to the bench,
right,
and fix it, and then show up with it when it's done.
Yeah.
And that's a huge difference. That there's a character thing, I think, that
it is.
You have to be confident and have that relationship with your customer.
Customer, right. Customer skill is a huge part of it. It's something that we're actually trying to teach, especially with the younger people again, because they haven't had the opportunity to develop it. Communication skills, another big one. You know, I've been lucky. I've been able to walk up to customers and really give them really bad news, but apparently I do it well enough that they don't get like irate about it, you know. But it's the reality. Again, we all hear stuff we don't like to hear, but it is what it is. But if you walk up and you're really cocky and arrogant, you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I couldn't fix it. I'm going home because it's 5 o'clock and see you tomorrow." That's not going to go well. Those skills are like soft skills, you know. Those aren't something you're going to learn out of a manual. That's stuff we start to force on people. I'm sorry, I know I'm running late. Another big thing is things like service reports. You know, we all have to fill out paperwork all the time. And actually, you know, we force that upon the apprentices. They actually create a service report every single day telling us what they did in their day. And it's all for a sense of creating this continuity, this adherence to how things have to be. So, other questions or concerns, comments? Hopefully you all found it beneficial and helpful. Thank you for attending.